this morning we have an exciting thing happening, our first 8th grade chapel. And who knows the name of this wonderful young lady sitting over here about to deliver her chapel? I would suspect a lot of lower school students know this young lady. Ethan, who is that over there? Cara, absolutely. 3rd graders, how many of you have had Cara as your big buddy so far? I see Ellie and Isha, and I think some others have too, right, Cara? Yeah, but I think we all think of Cara as a big buddy, don't we, in lower school. Not only does she help often in afternoons and with MSD, but she is just a role model of all role models that I just hope that many of us can grow up to be just like Cara. And I'm so glad she's giving the first chapel. Aren't you excited? So let's give her, wait, before I say that, Cara's a lifer. She has been here at Montgomery since she was 3 years old. Oh my gosh. Teachers, raise your hand if you've had the pleasure of teaching Cara. Mrs. Canals, Miss Janney, Mrs. Norris, Mrs. Molzette, Mrs. Blair, of course, Mrs. Walton, Mrs. Batson. Oh my gosh, we all love you, Cara, so come on up.
Once upon a time, there was a wolf like a wolf, and that wolf is me. I got caught in the biggest pickle of my life. It all started with this little girl and her grandmother. So I was walking around the village one day, and I noticed there was a pig loose and running in front of this house. Being the kind wolf that I am, I did not want the person living at this house to know that their pig was loose. So I went up to the door and rang the doorbell. An old lady answered. Before I could even get one word out, this old woman began screaming at the top of her lungs. Of course, this drew everyone's attention over to this old lady's house. So I gently shoved the old lady into her house and entered after her. Once we were in the house, I thought that I would be able to explain myself to her. But no, this old lady just kept yelling and yelling. I had never heard such shrieking in my entire life. I was so scared that someone was going to come over and get me, thinking that I was hurting this old lady. So acting out of fright, I ate the old lady. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't hungry at all, but I ate her for the sake of my own life. After I'd heard this old lady yell so loud, I had a headache. So I decided that I would take a little nap. I was off in dream world when all of a sudden I heard a knock on the door. Being frightened of what to do, I did the first thing that came to mind. I grabbed the old woman's clothes and stuck them on and then jumped back into bed. I thought that I could trick whoever was at the door. Now that I was prepared, I told the person to come in. To my surprise, the guest was just a little girl. She said, "Hello, grandmother, I have brought you some custard." I told the little girl thank you and then told her to go away. However, like most little children, this little girl started asking me questions. She went on and on with things like, "What big eyes you have," and "What big ears you have." I kept trying to think of responses, but I was running out of things to say. Just like the old woman, the little girl would not quit talking. Finally, the little girl said, "What big teeth you have." Not knowing how to respond to the little girl and not wanting a yelling session to begin, I found that the easiest thing to do was to eat the little girl. I felt terrible, but I think there was no other way. After all this mess, my terrible happening turned into a story by the village folk, except these people told the story in a way that made me into an evil villain. This story has ruined my life. I can't even show my face in the village anymore, and it ruined my weekly poker game. So I am setting the story straight. I was the victim in all of this mess. Welcome, students, parents, and faculty. As many of you know, my name is Cara Guernsey. I've been at Montgomery for 11 years, and I've seen the other 8th graders do their chapels. So now I'm here to present mine. Today I'm going to talk to you about different perspectives. Now, what story did I read you? Cat or Abby? Yep, I read Little Red Riding Hood. Now, what's different about it? Skylar? The wolf ate 2 people? Yep. Yep, instead of shoving the old lady in closet, he ate her. Anyone else? Brian. Yep, it was from the wolf's perspective. Now what's this? Anyone have any guesses? Evan. A what? A post with a nest on it? Not quite. David? A broom, good guess. Tabitha? Nope, not a zipper with grass on it. This is actually a needle with thread through it. Now, what do you think these objects are? Lily? What? Seashells? Close. Stefan? Shells? Almost. Isha? Rocks? These are all really good guesses, but these are grains of sand. Now this one's a little bit easier. What do you think this is? Zane. Right, it's a snowflake. Sometimes things are different when you look up close instead of far away. Here's some examples of needing to look at things in different perspectives. When you meet somebody new, you might only see a little part of them and decide you don't like that person. You have to look at the person as a whole before you can make that decision. Who knows? They might turn out to be your best friend. When I was little, I wasn't very nice to one of the girls in my grade. I didn't like her at the time, but the problem was I hadn't even tried to get to know her. After I got to know her, she turned out to be one of my best friends. When you're put in a difficult situation, you have to look at the problem in all different perspectives. In my life, I use photography to look at different perspectives. I love to take pictures. A lot of my pictures are from angles you don't look at when you look at an object. For example, when you look at a table, do you always look under it? This is how I've learned to look at things from different perspectives. Sometimes instead of zooming out to see the big picture, you have to zoom in to see the little details. When you have a big project due, you might have to zoom in from looking at the whole project to focusing on each step and all the little details. This year, as most of you know, the 8th graders have to do their Make a Difference projects. Well, when I looked at Make a Difference website, I thought, this is impossible. Now that I'm looking at each part individually, it doesn't look as scary. Another story is, when I first came to middle school, I had heard a bunch of stories about the teachers and the classes, especially math class. People said Mrs. Vessey's math class was really hard. She gave a lot of homework, and she's really strict. I spent a year with Mrs. Simpson, and when 7th grade came around, I was scared I was going to fail math and end up hating it. When I walked into Mrs. Vessey's math class for the first time, I was prepared for the worst. I was totally sure I was going to hate it. As it turned out, Mrs. Vessey is actually a really nice teacher. She may give you a lot of practice sheets, but you can ask her a bunch of questions and then correct it. Math is now one of my favorite classes. It's one of the classes I truly understand most of the time, thanks to Mrs. Vessey. Here's a quote. We can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorn bushes have roses, by Abraham Lincoln. These are both true, but you can complain or you can be happy. Now, is this glass half empty or half full? Half full? Does anyone think it's half empty? Some people see this glass as half full, which is the positive way of looking at it. Some say this glass is half empty, which is the negative way of looking at it. This shows you how you can change your perspective from the negative to the positive. We can always choose whether we want to be positive or negative. There's a famous quote about this. Some people see the glass half full, others see it half empty. I see a glass that's twice as big as it needs to be. George Carlin. I always try and look at things from as many perspectives as I can. Thank you and have a good day.